Hey folks, a few weeks ago I told you about a major court decision in the District of Columbia, their Court of Appeals. They struck down a magazine ban, the so-called high capacity magazine ban. Now there's an update, and this update can be considered even more important than the original ruling because the court was just asked to stop that decision from taking effect, and they refused. If you live in New Jersey, or any restrictive state that bans these so-called high-capacity magazines, this really does matter because this is how these cases eventually win. They evolve from one ruling to potentially the Supreme Court. And at the end of this video, I'll explain why this could force the Supreme Court to act. Here's a quick refresher if you haven't seen my other video. I'll put a link in the description so you can check it out. The case is Benson versus the United States. The DC Court of Appeals ruled that magazines over 10 rounds are in common use, therefore they are protected under the Second Amendment. Same logic we've seen from the District of Columbia versus Heller, DC versus Heller. That was a 2008 landmark case. We've talked about that case before. Also, Nysurpa versus Bruin, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, a 2022 landmark case as well. Here's where it gets interesting. In the recent video that I posted on this ruling, I mentioned that the DC government, of course, may appeal or seek additional review of this ruling because certainly they don't like it. Well, guess what? The District of Columbia didn't just accept that ruling. They tried to stop it. They filed a motion. They're clearly worried that the DC Court of Appeals ruled that magazines over 10 rounds are in common use and therefore protected under the Second Amendment. So they filed a motion asking the court to freeze the decision, strip it of its precedent value, and fast track a full rehearing. So what does this mean really? They're trying to contain the damage. The court just said, no, there's no emergency here, that we don't need any expedited review. There's no blocking of the decision that we made. The ruling stands for now. So here's an important point. This isn't really just about DC. Here's why I think there's a good chance that the Supreme Court will have to act on this case. This is about what's called a split in authority. It's also known as a circuit split when it's between circuit courts. So in this case, we're talking about the DC Court of Appeals versus Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. I mentioned in the other video, California, Illinois, there were some circuit courts that actually ruled in favor of the so-called high-capacity magazine ban. So obviously in this case you have federal district courts of appeal that are ruling in favor of the so-called high-capacity magazine ban, and then you have other courts like the DC Court of Appeals saying, no, this violates the Second Amendment per Bruin, per Heller. So now you have a split in authority. These courts are reaching these conflicting decisions on the same legal issue. This inconsistency in how laws are applied often prompts the Supreme Court to intervene, obviously for national uniformity purposes. So that's why I think this looks good for the Supreme Court to intervene and make a final decision once and for all on these so-called high-capacity magazine bans that many states, including New Jersey, have in place. I have to mention, for now, folks, nothing changes today in New Jersey. 10-round limit still applies unless you're law enforcement or fall under one of the exceptions. The law is still enforced, but I think this is better news. I think this ruling just adds to the argument these magazine bans are unconstitutional. So here's what to watch for. So DC may push for a full rehearing. The case could move towards the Supreme Court. They could take the case. Other courts may start reconsidering or may say DC Court of Appeals ruling doesn't apply to them if they're anti-gun states and they want to uphold magazine bans, or they could say that we're on board with the DC Court of Appeals. I just wanted to update everybody on this recent development. I think it's good news. Let me know in the comments what you think. So this isn't the end of the story, of course. We'll keep everybody up to date as changes happen, so make sure you're subscribed to get the updates. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and share it. And as always, stay safe and stay aware.